Sure. I had worked in marketing and advertising for several years. I had another ad agency that I sold back in 2006. And I really wanted to see if I could do it again. I had investors the first time, and so I had a little bit of a safety net. And Fingerpaint was almost a mulligan. It was my chance to go out and see if I could do it completely on my own.
Welcome to the Unconventional Path, Secrets to Igniting Your Business with Bela and Mike. I'm Bela Musits, the David D. Ray Professor of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Clarkson University in upstate New York.
And I'm Mike Wasserman, Professor of International Management at the University of Applied Sciences in Münster, Germany.
This podcast is about conversations with successful entrepreneurs you've never heard of, who have built successful businesses you have never heard of. Businesses and entrepreneurs that we can all identify with.
In each episode, I think we try to capture and share the essence of how interesting people often take unconventional paths to build their businesses. So we decided to interview a wide range of business people that have found and taken unconventional paths in their careers. And what we hope to do is capture some lessons, advice, inspiration that'll help you attain your entrepreneurial goals. So join us for interesting conversations and discussions with what we think are really inspiring guests on how you can ignite your business by exploring some of the many less traveled, unconventional paths that lie ahead.
So if you like the podcast, please tell your friends and give us a review on your favorite podcasting application. If you have suggestions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. Please send us an email at bela.and.mike@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. This week, I had an opportunity to sit down with Ed Mitzen, founder and CEO of Fingerpaint, located in Saratoga Springs, New York.
Bela, Fingerpaint is an interesting name. I've honestly never heard of it. What is this, some kind of art education program for little kids?
Great question, Mike. It is an interesting name. Ed and his company are in the creative business. What do I mean by creative? Well, they fundamentally help other companies sell their products. As you'll hear in my discussion with Ed, he talks about how that industry has changed from basically doing things 100% in print, meaning newspapers and things that you mail out to people, to today where everything is digital. It's an interesting story on how he has built his company and has changed with the times.
This sounds cool, Bela. Let's bring Ed in and hear more about his story.
Well, hello. Today we're here with Ed Mitzen, founder of Fingerpaint Marketing. We're at his Saratoga location here in upstate New York. One of 4 of his locations. He has one in Scottsdale, Arizona, Wayne, Pennsylvania, and Albany, New York. So Ed, tell me a little bit about what the motivation was for starting Fingerpaint.
Sure. I had worked in marketing and advertising for several years. I had another ad agency that I sold back in 2006. And I really wanted to see if I could do it again. I had investors the first time, and so I had a little bit of a safety net. And Fingerpaint was almost a mulligan. It was my chance to go out and see if I could do it completely on my own. Mm-hmm. And we started in 2008. We opened up shop, literally on card tables. So we had a couple of people, and kind of just took it from there.
Wow. And so what's sort of the primary business you guys are in?
Sure. So we're a marketing and advertising agency. So we do branding, basically the creation of brand images, brand design, and then all of the executional elements of that. So whether or not it's digital, print, email marketing, social, PR, event marketing, basically the whole gamut. Yeah. So we basically help sell things. That's what I like to position ourselves. Clients hire us to sell things, whether or not it's Doritos or it's GE. We're trying to influence behavior and drive some type of action.
Okay. So, and as you think about this space, the last 20, 30 years,
it's changed a lot.
Yeah. So talk a little about that. How do you adapt to that?
Not to sound crass, but in my last agency, we used to say that we were really good at shit that folds, right? Direct mail, sales aids, journal ads, newspapers, newspaper ads, anything like that. Now I would say 90% of what we do has some type of digital component to it. So the whole business has really changed. Data drives a ton of it because we're now accountable. I used to love when we weren't accountable, but now we're completely accountable because you can measure everything, as we know. And it's requiring a whole different type of skill in terms of who we recruit and the types of folks that we hire. So in the past, it was all about creative, and creative is still very important, but it's different, right? You're creating different. The creative that we're building is different for digital than it would be necessarily if we were doing 60-second television commercials and things like that.
Right.
So,
has that changed the cycle time? I mean, from sort of the beginning of a project to the time that you deliver?
You know what? I don't know. Well, yes, it's definitely shorter, and there's a more immediacy to tracking whether or not something's working or not. So if we're running ads on Google for a particular client and driving those people that click on it to an offer or a landing page or something, we can tell in a day whether or not it's actually working, testing different messages, testing the time of day on when the ads run. Everything is trackable. So in that instance, yes, it's a whole science behind tracking all that stuff, which it's fun. But it's also, you got to be pretty quick and nimble, right? In the past, we would take 3-4 months to develop a creative campaign. We still may take that for the actual creation of the branding, but then after that, the execution becomes a lot more immediate, right?
Right. So you started this in 2008, I think you said?
Yep.
And how many employees do you have today?
123.
Wow.
110 of which are really smart. That's what I tell our clients. You have to guess who
you have to figure out which small handful are the losers.
That's right. No, it's a great group of people. So yeah.
And so, what type of folks do you hire at a place like this, particularly with the emphasis on digital?
Yeah. So I kind of describe ourselves as the Super Friends, that cartoon where you had Aquaman and the Wonder Twins and Superman. Everybody comes in with different skill sets. So if we're developing, let's say, a website, we've got to have creative people that basically come up with the idea, copy, people that are writing the words, people that are designing the site for digital, which is, a digital designer is a lot different than somebody designing for print. You've got front and back end web developers that are building it to be responsive, so it works on different platforms: iPads, iPhones, Androids, big tablets. You've got analytics people that are working on the site, that are tracking it. You got people that are optimizing it for SEO and all that stuff. So it's really it's a mix of folks depending on the project.
So that seems like a much broader spectrum of talent diversity than
it used to be art and copy, right? We'd have strategy and account people, and then we'd have words and pictures, and that was pretty much what we did. And then we would outsource media, or you'd outsource. Now it's much more complicated, and it's challenging too for us to manage. Let's say we got 500 projects coming through the agency at one time. You'll have one project might need 30% of a writer for 3 weeks, and another project might need a full web designer, and the front end developer can't do his job until he gets from the designer her work.
Right, because it's serial.
Right. So there's this we have 9 people here that all they do is project manage to try to figure out who's coming off the beach, who's buried, where do we have to bring freelancers in, what's the timeline, when's it due. It's maddening, actually, in a fun way, but yeah.
Now, with that kind of really rapid growth, as I walk around your place here, it clearly has a feel to it. It has a culture, right? So how do you kind of develop that? How do you nurture it? And through this rapid growth, kind of manage it?
Culture is a huge part of what we do and or what we focus on. We have 5 kind of core values, and you'll see them outside hanging on the wall. But the first one is people first. So we try to focus on the employees first and foremost, and we figure if we take care of them, that will ultimately translate into a better customer experience. I think Wegmans does the same thing, where they basically say our customers come second, which is pretty ballsy, but they know that if they take care of the people that are working the front lines, that ultimately it'll make the consumers happy. So we try to do the same thing, and advertising it can be a brutally challenging work-life balance, and the hours can be hellacious, and the stress can be pretty intense because you're in the service business. So, if we're doing your website and you need it launched Monday, and there are bugs that we have to fix, people could be sleeping here all weekend trying to get that fixed.
Yes.
Or last minute changes and things like that. So we try to do things differently. We have a stock program, so everybody owns stock in the company. We have things like after 5 years, you get a month sabbatical to just, in addition to your vacation time, just to go hike the Incan Trail or read books on your couch, or just to decompress. And, it's funny, we get married and we take 2 weeks off and we feel guilty about it. So you tell these people that, hey, you have a month off, and it's no joke. We want you to change your email. I'm out of the office, your phone goes off, you're literally off the grid for a month, and you can do, and people go to Australia.
Sure.
They do things that they've always wanted to do but never had the time to do. People go back and get their pilot's license and things like that. So, I may be rambling, but we spend a lot of time on focusing on people, and trying to make sure that they're happy. We don't have any titles, which is a little bit unique. We don't have any offices. We allow dogs in the office. If you walk around and you see the carpet squares, that's in case the dog has an accident, you can just lift up the square and you don't have to change the whole carpet. But those little things that I think help to try to drive this collaborative workspace. I had a great learning lesson a few years ago where a buddy of mine who worked for an agency, they had a big pitch, and when you're working and trying to sell new business, you could spend a few $100,000 in hours trying to get ready for this. And the assistant that booked all the travel booked them to the wrong city. They had multiple offices and didn't, it was a human error. It happens, right? So they ended up missing the pitch. So the thing that I like to use and tell people here is that I never want the assistant that's booking the travel to feel that her job is any less valuable than the creative guy developing the concept or the creative woman developing the concept. Because if one part breaks down, the whole thing can fall apart. Right. So we try to focus, and that's kind of the no titles thing that we're trying to get through, is that everybody's important. We're all in this together. I'll take the trash out just like everybody else. And it seems to work. It's challenging at times because you have to make sure that people have clearly defined career paths, right, and they know who they report to and all that kind of stuff. But it's still, I think it works nice for us.
So when you hire somebody, or you're interviewing a prospective employee, what do you look for? Yeah, so
obviously you look for, are they talented? Can they help produce great work? And the team that I have, we'll let the creative people evaluate the creative talent, and the digital folks, I can't go in and say if somebody's talented from a web development standpoint. So we'll let the folks kind of analyze their ability. And then it's a cultural fit is a big thing. Can they get along with people? Are they going to be a pain in the ass to work with? Are they nice? We will often ask, if we're flying somebody in from out of town, we'll often ask the car service guy that picks them up at the airport, how did they treat you? Were they respectful? Because I know I'm going to always get everybody's A game.
Yes.
I want to know what they're doing
before they walk through the door.
To the guy who's carrying their luggage, right? And I think that kind of stuff really matters. And you look for people that are really ambitious and hardworking. We hire a lot of folks. We have an intern program. We will extend offers to kids. I say kids, right? They're 22, before they go back for their senior year. If we see that they're really hungry, they're hardworking. I tell folks all the time that I think when you get out of undergrad, nobody's really qualified to do anything. So it's more, are they going to show up and work hard?
So in this business, it seems like it's very, very competitive, right? Yeah. There's lots of firms.
I think there's 6,000 agencies
who claim they're in the same.
Right, and they all do pretty good work. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't be around. So
what's sort of the big challenges? How do you differentiate yourself?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So we try to differentiate ourselves on this idea of uncommon collaboration, and that we've built a model for working that we feel translates into really good work at a reasonable price. I mean, you never want to sell on price, but I think when the economy tanked, people started to reevaluate their marketing spend and ad spend, and what's working, what isn't. Yes. So we have to be very conscious that if a client's giving us $1 million, to work on a project, that's a lot of money. I think in this industry, you get numb to the numbers because they can be so big sometimes. So we try to differentiate based on this, this collaborative working environment, that we're hardworking, good people that have senior level talent, that we're not going to be perfect, but we're going to do what's right. And if we make a mistake, we'll fix it. And it's a lot of personal relationships, establishing yourself where these people know that if I call up on Thursday and I'm in a jam, I'm meeting the client, that we'll work through the weekend. We'll work all night if we have to, whatever you guys need to make you successful, we're going to do. And I think, that plays well with a lot of clients. They want people that they trust and that they like, and obviously the work's got to be really good. But it's a relationship thing, I think, in a lot of ways.
So how much of that is sort of word of mouth? A lot of it. Client, speaking to
it's a lot of it, or it's people that we've worked with in prior lives, or we do work for the Finish Line out in Indianapolis. The shoe company, and we got in there because one of our senior writers used to work with the guy who's running marketing. So, and he knew him. He knew he was talented. So, come on in. So we flew out to Indianapolis, a couple of meetings, and they give us a project. They like the work we do, and then suddenly you start doing more and more work for them.
Right.
And that's how it works a lot. I've found that to be true both with this agency and the last one. It's a lot of just relationship building, right?
And who's the chief relationship builder in the company?
Yeah, I would say it's myself and the people that really are in charge of the accounts. We have a whole team of people that are very client centric and client focused, and they tend to own that relationship. Our creatives are very good also at managing clients and working with clients, which isn't often the case in this industry. A lot of times, they want to fire all the clients because, they're not, there's just time pressures or, but our creative guys are great. So, but it's really everybody. Everybody's got that responsibility. Yeah.
Now, recently you did an acquisition out in Arizona, Scottsdale.
Yep.
And so talk to me a little bit about what inspired you to do that. What was the driving force?
Sure. So it was really three-pronged. So we wanted to open up an office on the West Coast. We had clients that were out in the California area that had asked us to be a little bit closer, both because they wanted the time change is somewhat problematic, and also the travel cost, because they're usually picking up the airfare and things like that, and they want you closer if it's cheaper. Secondly, we wanted to add, we were always looking for areas of marketing and advertising that we may need to beef up, right? So if there's a certain particular area that we feel like we do it, but there's other people that are doing it better, we really need to strengthen this. And public relations was one of those areas where we weren't doing a lot of PR, we weren't doing a ton of social media, and we wanted to try to find somebody on the West Coast, if it was a good culture fit, that was really strong in that area. And I think the third thing is we were looking for, if we were going to do an acquisition, we wanted to find somebody that didn't have all of the same clients we had, because of going back to that relationship conversation, right? We wanted to find a company that had connections and had done good work in clients that we didn't really have any tentacles into. Thinking that maybe down the road there'd be opportunities to cross-pollinate, and sell advertising into some of those clients if they needed it, or for us to be able to bring PR into some of the clients that they hadn't been exposed to. So, and then we did a lot of due diligence. We met with a lot of different companies. When we got hooked up with the company Olson Communications, culturally they were very much aligned with us. They were good, hardworking people. Michelle, who was running the company for the last 10 years, we just really connected. And I think, we had met some companies out there that do really good work, and, you can meet the owner and you're like, I can't work with this person. Right. In like 5 minutes, you can tell, okay, it's not going to work. So, it took probably 6 or 8 months for us to really kind of finalize the terms. We had Michelle come up here and meet a lot of the people here, and then I spent several times down in Phoenix, and we recently, once we closed, we flew the whole company up last week.
Oh wow!
And they were here for 3 or 4 days of onboarding. They attended our holiday party, and we really kind of wanted to welcome them to the family, so that it wasn't this big New York firm buying our boutique agency. Right. It's like, hey, this is what we're going to do. Let's do it together, and we're excited to have you. It was really cool.
Right. Yeah. So you've clearly built this sort of this culture here, right? And is that one of your primary responsibilities?
Culture?
Yeah.
I think it is. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't spend a lot of time actually doing the physical work itself, primarily because they're better than me and I'll mess it up.
Yeah.
So it's, but I think one of my chief jobs is to make people feel appreciated. Where there are pain points, try to work to fix it so that, it kills me when I hear about somebody missing a Little League game or a dance recital or things like that. It's crushing, right? And you would think as the owner, I would love it if people were here at 11 o'clock at night because you're making more money, but it's actually the reverse. It kills me. So I think that's a big part of what I have to do is kind of make sure that we're being true to our core values, right? And I do a lot of new business. I do a lot of, I love that. I love being out trying to, talk to people about what we're doing in a very kind of non-salesy way. And it's fun for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, everyone talks about how the vast majority of companies in this country are very small, 10 to 20 people.
Yeah.
So how does a small company like that, 10 to 20 people, not a lot of revenue, how do they sort of engage with someone like you? What kind of advice can you give
in
them?
terms of needing an advertising or marketing agency? I think
they're trying to sell products.
Yeah, I mean, and it's tough and I can empathize because I've had companies where we had 5, 10, 20 people and every 2 weeks you're worried about making payroll. Right. So I get that completely. And I would say that when you're starting out, one of the things that companies need to do is try to be relevant and in the news, right? For the right reasons. Not, trying to get yourself in business review articles or cited as a source for certain things, building up these relationships with a lot of the media that doesn't require a lot of money. PR is incredibly cost effective and not very expensive. And there are things that you can do that can try to play big, even though you're actually, you may be kind of small. And I think that's helped us a lot. If we're adding a new staff member, we'll do a press release or we'll put it on social media. Yes. Or if we try to find newsworthy things so that people notice us, because it is tough when you're starting out and you have no money to do a lot of marketing, right? And that'll come down the road. And we spend, it's funny, we spend about $300,000 a year now on our own advertising. And that's not including all the work that we do in-house that we don't charge ourselves for, right? So, we've got ads at the airport, and it's cost us about $50,000 a year for that one ad at the airport, but it's a big prominent place, and we look at it as almost a new business generator. If one person from one client walks through and sees our ad and goes, I should really learn more about those guys, or I should call them. One project and it's paid for itself. So it's easy for us to do that now because we've got a little bit of cash, but I think you can do that kind of stuff in smaller steps when you're a small company,
right?
But it's hard. Yeah.
So if you look out 3-4 years from now, where do you hope Fingerpaint will be?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to be a national player. I'd love to be considered, for some really fun work in a lot of different disciplines. So, right now, I still think that we're largely unknown. We're legends in our own mind, so to speak. But like Price Chopper goes through and announces they're doing this big rebranding, and the local pubs are calling companies down in North Carolina for comment. And I'm sitting there going, we do this for a living. We do $30 million a year in advertising and nobody thought to call us. And that's in our own market. So if I would like to get to the point where we're recognized nationally as a player in the space. And if you look at, obviously Manhattan is the epicenter for a lot of advertising agencies. But if you look at where there's some really hot, great shops, Boulder, Minneapolis, Richmond, Virginia. I mean, you don't have to be, on Park Avenue to be able to be a player. And, so I want to continue to grow it in a way where we don't lose our core values and we don't run, we're not chasing a dollar. It's more we're just trying to build up a company and create opportunities for the staff and have fun. And, it sounds, I guess, I don't know if Jack Welch would agree that that's the right, I'm not focusing so much on EBIT, all the time, but it's just trying to build a business and do good work.
Right. Now the building we're in is the old Borders bookstore building here in downtown Saratoga Springs. So what sort of inspired you to have, basically prime retail space?
Yeah, no, that's a great
Broadway
question. So we had been in an office around the corner. We had about 20 people at the time, and we were out of space, and we were looking. And I looked all over. All over. I wanted to be in Saratoga Springs because, believe it or not, if I'm making a presentation in San Francisco and I say we're in Saratoga Springs, New York, if there's 10 people in the room, probably 4 of them have been here, been to Lake George, families vacationed here, been to SPAC for a Dead show when they were in college. So if I was in Malta, no one would know where that was. So there was a real desire to stay in the city of Saratoga Springs. So we looked at a lot of different places, and in our business, it's very challenging to plan for capacity. If we win a big account, we might have to hire 20 people in 60 days. So you're constantly teetering between, you don't want to carry so much space that your margins stink, but yet you want to have room to grow. This was the last place we looked at. And because I thought in my mind, A, we can't afford it. B, it's too big. And C, I'm paying a premium for being on Broadway where I don't need to be, right? So I had a space planner come and look at it, a guy I'd worked with in the past, and said, tell me how many people we can fit in this building. And initially, we were just going to take the top floor, and they were going to fill the staircase in and keep the bottom for retail. And we met with the landlord, this guy out of Buffalo, and so we could fit about 70 people on the top floor. And it was a 10-year lease, and I just didn't think that would be enough. So then we started having conversations with him to say, well, you're going to spend X amount to close up the top floor and open up a secondary entrance and, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Right. So I said, can we work something out where, our rent will start off slow and grow as we grow? And it was terrifying because if we don't grow, then I'm, paying $500,000 a year for a building I'm not using. Right. And he was very accommodating. The building had been vacant for almost 18 months. I was very concerned within the community that people would revolt against it because they want a Whole Foods, an Apple store. They wanted something that was a little bit more consumer friendly. So I met with local people to kind of let them know our plans, that we were thinking about doing this, and kind of set the stage for it. Yeah. And I think once we moved in, the community is now seeing that it's tremendously beneficial. We've got 100 plus people that make decent salaries that are going out to lunch. They're going to the bars. I think our average age is 28 or 29. So, the restaurants and bars are doing great because of us. They're shopping, they're Christmas shopping at lunchtime. And so I think it's been good for the community, but it was terrifying in the beginning. So, and what's interesting is, and this is something I completely didn't plan for, is that when we moved in this area, it legitimized us as a real agency because people thought, well, they must be good if they can afford that space, right? And I think GE called us after they had seen the press release that we had taken over this building, and I don't think that would have happened had it not been for the space. Yes. And we actually had our first meeting here with GE while it was still sheetrocked, and there were no, it was plywood on the floor and everything. And we had a table set up with hard hats, and we met with them here because we said, if we can't christen this thing with GE, then who can we christen it with, right? And it was trying to show them that, look, we're all in. We'd love to work with you guys, and they've been a great client.
Right. So I had one other question about hiring. So with this tremendous growth, one of the challenges that often fast-growing companies have in secondary markets is they have to import talent because there's not enough of that particular skill within that region. Have you found that to be a challenge? Yeah,
it was a challenge in my last business when we first started. This is back in 99. It was a challenge because creative talent in New York, Saratoga might as well be the moon, right? And I think they were concerned if I move up here and the business doesn't work, then I'm like, I got to pull my kids out of school again. It's a big kind of commitment. I think now that we've got a track record that people see that we know what we're doing and we're going to be around for a little while, it's less and less of a impediment. we do struggle with recruiting a 28-year-old single woman, just graduated Columbia Business School. They don't want to, this isn't the community that most of those folks want to be in. They want to be in the city, and
yes.
they're different. Where we have a really compelling story is if somebody's been let's say a woman's been a creative director for 15 years in the city, lives in Bronxville, 2 young kids, looking to have a yard.
Yes.
It's a nice story because they can come up here and they can work on brands that they didn't expect to be able to work on in, a sleepy little town like this.
Right.
But it's a challenge. And I think, there are certain positions that are brutal to fill. App developers and iOS developers.
Right.
We can't find them fast enough. And, I talk to people in Phoenix and they're saying the same thing.
Right.
It's just there's certain skill sets.
Those are skill sets that are rare nationally.
Right. But it's a challenge. I think one of the things that we try to do, and we didn't necessarily do a good job of this early on, is we don't we are who we are, right? So we don't try to convince somebody to move here. We want them to come up and experience it and look at homes and look at schools. And we've had a couple people from Chicago that have moved out here, and I tell them, look, if you want Pakistani food delivered to your condo at 2 a.m, this isn't the right spot for you. So they go in kind of eyes wide open.
Right. So you had mentioned that, your employees come first.
Right.
But at the same time, if a customer calls you on Thursday
right.
and says, hey, I got to have this by Monday morning
right.
at 8 o'clock,
right.
that you guys pull all the stops
right.
to make that happen.
Right.
So, how do you balance that with
it's
home and work and all that kind of stuff?
It's a constant struggle. And we try to tell people that if you have a week where you're slow, it's okay to go home at noon. You're not going to lose your job if you need a couple of comp days, if you need to just get the heck out of here, because it's very unpredictable, our business. So I know that in 3 weeks you're going to have to be here at 11 o'clock at night. Even if we do the best planning we can, those things still come up. So it's trying to convince people and get them comfortable with being grown-ups and managing their clock, right? And I think it's a lot of covering for one another too. We really try to, as best we can, if somebody's got a family commitment or, that they go. And we have a lot of working mothers that work here. And honest to God, I don't know how they do it. With juggling, schools
right.
and doctor appointments and things like that. And like it or not, a lot of times that falls to them. And we try to be incredibly understanding and that's got to come first. I think we have our priorities in line, but it's tough. It's a tough thing. I think nowadays too, we're so enslaved to, being 24/7 connected. I know one of the things that I started doing about a year ago is taking advantage of the do not disturb button on my phone. Mm-hmm. And if I go home and it's 8 o'clock at night, I flick the do not disturb button. I've already talked to my kids, so I know they're cool. And then that way if the text goes off or the phone rings, it's nothing that can't wait until 7 o'clock the next morning
right.
for the most part. So, and that's helped quite a bit too. So I think there are little tricks like that. Carving out certain hours of the day, like meeting free, like just blocking your calendar so nobody, because a lot of times you're in meetings all day, you can't even get to work done,
right.
and then you're doing the work till 10 o'clock at night.
Right.
So, but it's a struggle. I think it's a struggle for everybody, and I think as long as the staff knows that we're trying mm-hmm. and we're really committed and we really care, if you're missing things or that work is interfering with home life, as long as
right.
we're keeping it in our eye on the ball, I think they appreciate that.
So during the interview process, during the selection process, is there something you look for that says that, yes, this person can deal with things like that? Because there's, some individuals where this notion of those kind of disruptions are really challenging. I'm
not really able to, at least I haven't been able to get that insight from an interview, but mm-hmm. I think once we get people on board, you almost have to save people from themselves. We have a lot of type A people that work really, really hard. And I have to almost throw them out of the building and say, look, go home. Your inbox is going to have something in tomorrow. Go home, and it's tough.
Yeah.
It's a tough thing, I'm incredibly grateful that they're so committed, and I think it's a big reason why we're so successful is they really give a crap.
Right.
But at the same point, I don't want people fried at 35 years old and they're shot, right? Because they're burned out.
Right.
Well,
excellent.
Good. Thanks.
Well, that was a great interview with Ed Mitzen. One of the things that really made me think a little bit, Mike, was this notion of how he talked about these days in the advertising business, you're much more accountable because there's so much data available to measure how well your ad or your program is doing. As Ed mentioned, these days it takes one day to get feedback versus the many weeks it took in the past. So, Mike, what do you think about this? How do you think it impacts other things that entrepreneurs should be aware of?
Well, the whole idea of data and data analytics and data mining and dashboards, all these buzzwords that entrepreneurs are hearing these days, whether they're in the classroom or taking a seminar or reading the business press, this is definitely something you need to pay attention to. You might not know a mean from a standard deviation, but you need to be able to ask good questions and have at least somebody on your team that understands statistics. Nothing is more important than getting this real-time feedback. And if you're not doing it, your competitors likely are. So I really can't underestimate the criticality of using data in real time, but I also don't think you need to do it yourself. I think there's plenty of people out there that can help entrepreneurs understand what are the right metrics, what's the right way to respond. It leads me to another kind of question that I'll ask for you, Bela, which is there such thing as too much data, and how do you tell the difference between good data and bad data?
Well, that's a great question, Mike, because I think it's very easy these days to collect all sorts of data. Oftentimes, collecting that data is free or almost free, so companies collect lots and lots of it. The real challenge is sorting through what the important elements of that data are. And I think that's really, really difficult, and it comes with experience. So I like to think about focusing on your customer. What elements are important to your customer? So what's your customer thinking? What's your customer wanting to get from your product? And then try to establish a correlation between those customer desires and the data you're collecting. And if you can find that correlation, then you can drive more customer interaction, more customer sales, and better customer satisfaction.
That's great. And those just lead to, I think, great questions, Bela, that any vendor that you're talking to as an entrepreneur that wants to help you with this is ask her or him that specific question. How do I translate this to specific customer-focused metrics, right? The data that you're trying to sell me, right? The dashboard that you're trying to offer me. Relate this to me to the customer.
Yeah, I think that's really great. And it's something that is possible now that a short, 10, 15 years ago really was not very possible. So it's a great opportunity for entrepreneurs to learn about this and leverage it in their business.
Yeah, I think Ed made some great points. It leads me to another question for you, Bela. And I liked what he said about culture and acquisitions and the importance of looking at the people involved and will they mesh. You've been around venture capital for a while, and you've done this idea of due diligence. How do you do due diligence on culture from the investor standpoint? And from the entrepreneur standpoint, what can you do to build a culture and show your investors that culture is important to you?
Yeah, I thought that was a real good part of the discussion I had with Ed. And if you listen to him, when they made that acquisition, he just went out there and hung out with the people, right? He hung out at the office. They went out socially, and he just got a feel for what those various different individuals were like. And, when I was full-time in the venture business, somebody once asked me, I was on a panel, and somebody once asked me, so Bela, what's the most important thing you look for when you're making an investment? Is it the marketplace? Is it the technology? Is it distribution or sales? And I say, well, it's none of those. The most important thing to me is when I'm sitting at the table, across the table from the founder, I ask myself the question, do I want to work with this person for the next 5 to 10 years? If the answer to that question is yes, then all of those things about market and sales and projections, then I start thinking about those. But if the answer to that question is no, then the rest of the stuff doesn't matter. And I think that sort of speaks to culture. It's really, really important. And often folks will tell you in any merger or acquisition, the culture plays a key role in whether that merger or acquisition is successful. You know, Mike, the other thing that struck me as Ed was talking was he said that his number one thing is employees, right? Which oftentimes is different than what you read in textbooks or you hear about in other business publications. They always talk about customers come first, customers come first. And Ed's philosophy was people come first, i.e. his employees come first, because if he takes care of them, then he knows that his employees will take care of their customers. I thought that was an interesting perspective. What are your thoughts?
Well, it reminds me of a time that I was in a small room and I heard the founder of Southwest Airlines give kind of a cappella, one-off kind of discussion with a bunch of academics and practitioners. And Herb Kelleher, he's a chain smoker. You might have heard stories about him drinking whiskey at this thing, and told the story. And he used that exact model. He said in the airline industry, typically what the issue was that we exist to make the shareholders happy, right? The reason for a business is to give the investors a return on their money. And he said we turn that upside down. And he said if our employees are productive and doing the right things and have a productive culture, they'll make sure the customers are satisfied. And if the customers are satisfied, they're going to come back. And that's ultimately what's going to influence our bottom line and keep the shareholders happy. So I think Herb Kelleher had a very similar philosophy to Ed Mitzen, in that the employee satisfaction, the employee motivation, engagement, engagement is the big buzzword we use now, Bela, but it's the idea that if the culture is healthy, the employees will work hard and do the right thing. If we empower them to make customers satisfied, they will. And those satisfied customers are what's going to lead to a healthy bottom line.
Yeah, I've heard that story as well. And I have a sort of a second piece to that. I once heard an interview with, I think it was Herb Kelleher, the same guy. And they were talking about what he looks for when he hires people. He said the number one thing that we look for, the number one attribute, is attitude. He goes, if folks have a positive attitude, then that's who we want to hire. Because he said, look, we can train people how to fly airplanes. We can train people how to be ticket agents. We can train people how to be ramp agents. But we really, really look for attitude. And I think that's related to culture, because culture and attitude are sort of juxtaposition next to each other, right? Culture is really the attitude of the business, right? Not the attitude of individuals, but it's made up of that combined attitude of all the individuals. So I think those are some great points that Ed made. And I know he really got my attention when he said, I put my employees first.
Agreed. Hey, let's talk about this idea of safety net, another idea that Ed brought up. And what's your take on kind of how important a safety net is or isn't from both the entrepreneur standpoint and the standpoint of investors looking at a startup?
Well, I'll tell you that back in my full-time venture capital days, we wanted to make sure that the entrepreneurs were committed, meaning that they were all in and 100% of their focus was on building the business. And lots of times we'd come across folks who were maybe still working at their day job, I'll call it, and they were looking to start a business, nights and weekends, and they were trying to raise some financing. And that really, in many ways, is a non-starter, because we want your devotion and time and energy to be 100% focused on building the business. And, there's lots of examples of companies, large companies. And I remember this when I worked at IBM Research. IBM Research, or IBM, I would say in a broader sense, often started some internal projects that they said were, we want to get into this market segment. We want to get into this business. So they take a group of people and they say, we're going to establish an entrepreneurial environment for you. What we're going to do is we're going to take a separate part of the building. We're going to cordon it off, and you're going to be over there, and in order to help build this business. And most of them were pretty big failures. Why? Because I think it has to do with the safety net, right? Those folks were still IBM employees. They still parked their car in the same spot in the parking lot. They still ate at the same cafeteria. Their paycheck still came from the same place. So I think the entrepreneurial mindset is very different. You're willing to take that step without the safety net. And I think it demonstrates, number one, 100% commitment. And it also demonstrates to a potential investor that you're really in this.
Interesting points, Bela. This was a great interview with Ed Mitzen. I think there were some real good takeaways for people thinking about somebody who's followed a non-traditional path and somebody who's been a successful entrepreneur. His emphasis on human capital and people and culture, I think, is something that we shouldn't underestimate in finding your way. I think the second piece about data and accountability is really important. The idea of understanding the key customer-focused data that you can access and use and finding the right people to help you make that a part of your everyday routine. And then the last is this idea of safety net and knowing where your safety net is or is not, and using the idea of, hey, there's a lot of risk in entrepreneurship, and this idea of the safety net is something that sometimes you need to go without it in order to really launch and be successful. So at least three really key issues, I think, that came from the discussion with Ed Mitzen. Bela, thanks.
Yeah, I think it was a great interview with him. A lot of good takeaways that I thought were key for lots of entrepreneurs and people interested in starting a business or building their existing business. So, folks, thanks for joining us on this podcast. If you enjoyed it, please tell your friends and give us a nice positive write-up on iTunes. And always welcome to hear your comments or suggestions you may have. Feel free to email us at bela.and.mike@gmail.com. Thanks again, and see you next time.